Hello and welcome to this week's edition of The Front Page. After a busy weekend of action, including the opening fixture of the jump season at Cheltenham, we've got plenty to chew on today. We'll be assessing what we learned at Cheltenham. We'll be looking at the final fixtures of the British Flat season and looking ahead to what we might learn from them for next year's Classics. And between that, we'll be taking a look at the Breeders' Cup, coming to us from sunny Delmar this weekend, where City of Troy is going to bid for immortality in the Breeders' Cup Classic. For all of that, I'm your host, Racing Post editor Tom Kerr, and I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by Maddie Playle. Welcome, Maddie. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks, Tom. Good weekend. I was writing our story, What's on This Week, yesterday during my shift, and it's an incredible week. Starts off a bit quietly, but can't wait for the Breeders' Cup. Then you've got action at Down Royal, Grade 1s. Jerry Colomb, last year's Gold Cup second, is back. And some really good action at Wetherby and Ascot too as well.
Fantastic. If you had to pick up one thing you could do this week, where would you go?
I mean, it's got to be Delmar,
hasn't it? Delmar,
yeah,
isn't it?
It's got to be Delmar.
I'm glad you didn't say Westminster for the budget. Yeah, that would have been
that would have been the journalist's answer, wouldn't it?
Just can't wait for a little bit of a fiscal event. And joining us from Cheltenham itself, James Stevens, West Country correspondent. James, you were at Cheltenham both days. Give us your sort of headline. What was your favourite moment from the 2 days?
I'd have to say the favourite moment for me personally would be Potter's Charm, because there just seems this feeling going into the jump season. We want exciting horses in this part of the world. We want exciting horses. And this was one I'd had on my side for a couple of weeks after he won at Worcester. And I thought, this is potentially one of those exciting horses who could come in and break the Mullins dominance. And to see him put up a really good performance for me was a highlight. Because it's early October, it's the end of October even. It's early season. You want these big, exciting horses that are going to flourish through the rest of the season. And I think we might have had one in Potter's Charm. So that was a highlight for me. But always good to be back in Cheltenham. The jumps are truly back now.
Excellent. Well, James, we're going to stick with you actually, because let's just dive straight into Cheltenham and what we learned over the 2 days of the showcase meeting. It was fantastic to be back at Cheltenham. The course was looking truly resplendent when the weather played ball. There was a record crowd in attendance over the 2 days. But what are your key takeaways, James? What did we learn from the opening 2 days at Cheltenham?
Well, on the track, I mentioned Potter's Charm. There were performances which we are very used to in Cheltenham, which is very good performances from the Irish. We saw fields which were dominated by the Irish, particularly novice chases, novice hurdles. And the first four winners on Saturday were Irish trained, which just gave us that feeling of what is to come for the rest of the season. The one that was a standout and the horse that you're sort of looking at towards the rest of the season, Senior Chief, Henry de Bromhead. We know his record at Cheltenham, not just in the festival in March, but in the other meetings, said he could be a Grand National horse. But also from an interesting angle in terms of not just what could expect in the British season, but also the Irish season. We saw winners for Gordon Elliott. We saw winners for Gavin Cromwell, John McConnell. It's not just this idea of Willie Mullins is coming in here over to Britain and indeed Cheltenham and winning the races. It's these other, I suppose, what you'd call the lesser Irish trainers, if you're going to look at the Irish Trainers' Championship, are coming to Britain for opportunities. Now, we've spoken a lot about Willie Mullins and how dominant he is and what the knock-on effects will be. In the last few years, we have seen as Mullins has grown and become more dominant in Ireland, these other trainers have looked to other opportunities. And from an owner's perspective, it's not hard to convince an owner from Ireland to say, we might have a really good chance at Cheltenham. Do you fancy going over for it? It's not a hard sell, is it? And Gavin Cromwell was the second winning most trainer at Cheltenham last season, which is staggering when you consider it, how many horses are trained in Britain. So that was one of the key takeouts for me. That theme is probably going to evolve in November, December as well, and into the rest of the season. I asked a few trainers from Ireland, John McConnell, Gordon Elliott and Gavin Cromwell, whether they planned on coming back, and that certainly seemed the plan. But we did have a Willie Mullins runner here. That's only his second runner at the October meeting. His other one won, fine margin. A little bit disappointing, but still ran well. So they're the key takeouts from an Irish perspective. On the ground, there was a very good crowd, a record crowd. It's the fourth year the October meeting has broken its own record with 20,585 people on course. 5,000 of those were students brought in from Invades. Looked like they had a hell of a party. We're just discussing off air. The windows of a press room were shaking from the music, which I don't want to put a genre on because it's not my thing, but it was very loud and they seemed to be having a great time. Other key factors, lovely weather for the day, but also Cheltenham have made a lot of changes over the summer, which we've discussed, and we are beginning to see the effects of those. A lot's going to happen between now and March, and a lot of those changes, i.e., program updates, are going to be more seen in March than they are in October. But things like group deals changing from a minimum of 10 to now a minimum of 6, that's already beginning to prove an advantage. But the key one, which punters were happy about, is that they could move their pints and they could carry pints in certain areas. One of which of those areas is the betting ring, a place at Cheltenham which has possibly, fair to say, gone downhill for a period of time, because the geography of the track is people are more towards the Guinness side, and the bookmakers there have flourished, and the Tatterstall's right past the winner's enclosure has been left, it's sort of out of the way of where foot traffic is. That was better. Turnover was much better. And people generally have a good mood. That was the thing I took away. There was a good mood about Cheltenham. It felt like all the issues they've had, all the problems, they might not be fixed, but people feel they're being listened to.
Yeah, thanks, James. I was there on Friday, and I thought the track was looking absolutely fantastic. The racegoer experience tremendous. It actually felt quite quiet on Friday, but I suppose the crowd there of about 9,000 is significantly smaller than on the Saturday. Let's just turn to some of the action on the track there. Obviously, a big focus this year and through the season is going to be the performance of Irish horses in Britain. You highlighted it is not just Willie Mullins anymore, and indeed he just had the one runner at Cheltenham. First 4 winners on Saturday, a couple on Friday. Actually, given the recent performance of Ireland at Cheltenham meetings, that's kind of par for a meeting of this nature, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly seems that way. The handicaps were pretty competitive. It's early season handicaps. They're hard to judge because you're debating who's got the best form and who's going to be the most fit for the race. I suppose if a horse is coming over from Ireland for a meeting in October, you're not bringing a horse over with the feeling they're going to improve a few pounds for the run. You're going to be going there wanting to win, and that's certainly the case. Senior Chief was in the big 100 grand handicap chase. That was, I suppose, the impressive performance. Travelled well through the race, had a lot of the attributes you'd want in the Grand National. He was beaten in the Irish National last season, but certainly a lot better this time. Jumps well, and yeah, Henry de Bromhead instantly said, we've always thought about the English National. It sort of got a line drawn through after he was disappointing in the Irish Grand National. It was quite, I think at one point he was favourite. I don't think he went off quite favourite, but he was clearly fancied for that and it didn't go to plan. And he's definitely one to take out of the meeting. He was very, very impressive, and you'd be not surprised if he's going to improve a long way, because last year it was a classic case of campaigning against good horses and being beaten, and now he's in handicaps. He's got a mark, and he's going to probably progress through. The other point I would make out, and probably the low par of a week for me, was the novice chases and the novice hurdles, which the turnout was disappointing. There's no two ways about it. Not just the field sizes. I mean, the 2 mile novice chase had 4 runners, just one from Great Britain. The 3 mile novice chase had 6 runners, and the quality of those races, they didn't have that sort of standout Grade 1 star that you're looking for. They were fairly moderate races in all fairness, and they weren't quite the star quality you want to see. I mean, Flooring Porter won the 3 mile novice chase last season, just to give a guideline. That suggests that the idea to change the 2.5 mile novice chase, which was the Turners, into a handicap might well be already starting to look like a good move, because there was a 2.5 mile handicap and 2.5 mile novice handicap chase, which was extremely competitive, had 11 runners in, and instantly you're looking at a race like that and going, right, these could be back here in March with a serious chance. So that was the key takeout. There was a bit of disappointment from there. The Grade 2 novice hurdle as well, which had been at the November meeting, has been moved back, was won by the 113 rated Valgrand. That didn't stand out to me like, wow, this is top level racing that Cheltenham won. But the prize money for some of those races was pretty decent. The novice chases were 40 grand. Ground was pretty good. The track did look immaculate, as you rightly say. That was just a little bit of a disappointment. But I don't think that's an issue of Cheltenham have got this wrong. I think that's just another sign that there are just not that many, not enough good quality horses about at the minute.
And Maddie, how about you? What are your key takeouts? I saw you nodding your head vigorously there as James was talking about the changes that they've made to the Festival of Turners.
Yeah, I definitely think that's correct. These races, they're never particularly strong. I don't think, in my memory, in the October meeting at least, definitely in November, they'd probably get a little bit stronger just because it's such a long season. You know, if you have a proper horse that you want to be winning the the old RSA, the Brown Advisory or the Arkle, do you really want them to be at Cheltenham in October? I'm not sure. For me, I think a couple of things came out of the meeting. Number one was just how good it was to be back. I think there's a feeling you get when Cheltenham's on. I wasn't even there, but watching it on TV, it's just a special place. And I thought the fields were good. I thought a lot of the handicaps were really competitive. I just really enjoyed it, and I thought it was really refreshing. And maybe it's because it's that time of year where I have probably just about had enough of the flat season. Can't say that too loudly with the Breeders' Cup coming up this weekend. But yeah, I thought we've still got that magic, and it's nice because we can be kind of pessimistic in racing sometimes. And I think there was an awful lot of good stuff going on at Cheltenham over the weekend. I thought it was very interesting, Dan Skelton. I think he is really going to be gunning for that Trainers' Championship this year. We've seen it with the runners he's sent out so far this season. At one stage he had 8 horses in the Silver Trophy at Chepstow. He sent a lot of runners to that meeting. Not so many to this meeting, but he had 2 winners from 5 runners, including the Grade 2 win with Valgrand, who was spectacular, albeit probably wasn't the strongest race. I found his comments afterwards quite entertaining. It was almost like, Dan, you know you've blown that county hurdle mark, and you're going to have a rethink now. But yeah, the way he's targeting races, clearly with quantity in some areas but quality in others, I'm just really interested to see how that develops throughout the season. Another thing, from a punting perspective, I don't know about everyone else, I'm not doing very well on that front at the moment. And I just, watching all those races, particularly over fences, pace, you've got to be on the pace at Cheltenham. You know, the amount of front runners who you think they're not going to quite be good enough. And just the way that the races evolve suits them so well, and they just don't get passed up the hill. I have to remind myself of that every year. You know, if you get into a rhythm out the front at Cheltenham, you're going to be very tough to pass. So that's my note to self when I go to next month's November meeting, which I can't wait for. But yeah, obviously I can't have the sort of ground perspective that you and James did because I wasn't there, but I thought there was a lot to be positive about. Cheltenham's a special place. It was great that our colleague Alastair Down was sort of honoured with the naming
with the press room. Absolutely, yeah.
And yeah, I can't wait to get back there myself.
So I was there obviously on Friday for Alastair's press room unveiling, and I got the train from London, and as is the nature of these things, when you've got a very precise time to be somewhere, obviously the trains went catastrophically wrong.
Oh no.
So I was at Bristol Parkway, as they're sort of saying, the train is delayed, not by X time, just delayed.
Oh no.
I thought I'll text Alastair and I'll say I'm very sorry, I think I'm going to miss the ceremony. Not appreciating at that point the hilarity I was going to cause for Alastair, who found the fact that for the first time in his career, his editor was apologising for being late rather than him. Yeah. Alastair, of course, for those who know him, will know his talent is matched by his capacity to miss deadlines. But it was tremendous, very nice for Cheltenham to honour him, and it was great to see Alastair back on Cheltenham. The track where he's written so many of his fantastic pieces. James, just very quickly, you spoke to Alastair, of course. Give us your reflections on his honouring of the press room.
Yeah, a really, really good day, and interesting to listen to so many different people from all age groups. I quite enjoy talking racing just generally, and when you speak to people of different generations, they talk about people they sort of idolise and admire growing up. There's something about when you grow up and you're getting into a sport and getting into something. So people of a certain vintage were like Lester Piggott, and people will grow up watching Frankie Dettori and other people, Ryan Moore, and those people who you've sort of grown to love the sport with and have been a part of that journey have a special place. There aren't many people who have an impact on you without even being part of the sport itself, i.e. being the horse, the trainer, the jockey, and B, someone who can cross those generations as well to essentially get your admiration despite being, whether you're old, whether you're young, whatever. Alastair had that, and he had a really special way of attaching his work with people, and whether it was Cheltenham, where I think everyone seems to think was his best work, but all those great jumps meetings over the years and on the flat as well. I mean, it's quite incredible how someone can do that, and credit to Alastair for doing it. And to see so many people recalling stories on Friday was really, really special. And you know, for years to come, for Cheltenhams to come, for all those festivals, I think it's going to be no pressure on all of us having Alastair's name on the press room door every time we come back. So.
Yeah, it sounds quite... I second that. Beautifully said, James, by the way. But it sounds quite dark. But it's lovely that we can do this sort of thing when Alastair's still here.
Yeah,
because often press rooms and
everyone
things
was joking
get honoured.
about this, you know. The number of people who sort of said, "Oh, Jesus, I saw the news and I thought, Christ, Alastair's died."
Yeah.
But no, he's very much with us, and absolutely right, Maddie. Yeah, normally these things only happen after people have unfortunately left. So it's wonderful that they've done it at this time. Just note to both of you. Be inspired by Alastair's name, but not by his relationship with time. It's a dangerous game. He was very often the last one in that press room. We'll draw a line on that. That's the end of our wrap up of Cheltenham, the first of many that many times we'll be covering it this year. I would just say at this point, the big jump off, our fantastic jump season preview, is still available to buy from the Racing Post shop. We'll put a link to that in the description. It's absolutely packed with insight for the jump season. And of course, in the Racing Post right now, we're currently running our Unmissable Stable Tours series. Today was Gordon Elliott, and you can get access to that both by buying the Racing Post newspaper, but also by taking out a Members Club Ultimate subscription. And again, we'll put some details in the description. Okay, Maddie, we're going to turn now to the Breeders' Cup because for a lucky few, it's off to Delmar this week.
Who are we sending?
We're sending David Jennings, mainly just for literative purposes. DJ's Delmar Diary is coming up this week, I believe. And he is going to be on the coast, the Pacific coast, the beautiful Pacific coast, Delmar, just north of San Diego. Wonderful, balmy, 20 degrees, stunning race course, very Hollywood. And very fitting that we have a proper cinematic showdown with City of Troy, bidding for Breeders' Cup Classic glory. Is he going to do it? Is he going to do it? The markets really quite fancy him.
I'm such a pessimist, but I think he might, you know.
Okay.
First off, I will say it's incredibly difficult to dislike David Jennings, but I am very jealous of him right now. Yes, look, this has been the narrative of the whole flat season, hasn't it? City of Troy, his superb dominance as a juvenile, coming back, that horrendous run in the 2000 Guineas, much like August Rodin the year before. Was it all over? Then he went to Epsom and he came back as if nothing had gone wrong. The Eclipse, we had some more questions there, didn't we? He looked very workmanlike in the mud.
Yeah. Then
he went to the Juddmonte, of course, and blew those concerns out of the water under an inspired Ryan Moore ride. Being by Justify, this big sire, obviously the future of Coolmore is rested upon his hooves in many ways. At least you'd think that from the way that Aidan O'Brien talks about him and how important he is for their whole empire at Ballydoyle. This notion that they could try him over dirt has been mooted for a long time. Even after the Derby, they were saying we might go to the Travers. That didn't happen. They obviously have Sierra Leone, who was narrowly beaten in the Kentucky Derby in that ownership, who they had to explore that route with instead. But they've done what they did with Galileo and almost thought, right, well, we'll roll the dice at the end of the season, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But that's, for me, what sets City of Troy apart is his pedigree. He's got such an incredible stride, and he certainly looks like he's the sort of horse who can really dig in and be tough. For me, when you watch those dirt races in America, our horses aren't accustomed to racing that way, i.e. brake really fast, pace pressure early, and then hang on and be gritty at the finish. They almost run their races backwards to how we do here. We tend to build and develop throughout. So it asks such a big question of them. How much of Justify is going to be transferred to City of Troy over the weekend? I think for me that's the question. I think fantastic that they stopped along at Southall on the way. I mean, we saw how popular he was there and how brilliant he was and how transparent they were about the work and the horses he was working with and what they were hoping to get out of it. I thought that was brilliant. And really, again, I'm in danger of sounding way too positive on today's show, but it showed the love for racing, first and foremost. And I thought that was brilliant that they showcased him there. But I was saying this, we were chatting about it in the office before we came on. I think they might have found a good opportunity to give this a go with him in that I don't think it's an outstanding year. I think arguably Fierceness, who's been the top dog, if you like, on the dirt, from what I can tell in America this season, him aside, I don't think it's a particularly deep American challenge against him. I think if anything, it's the Japanese horses you've got to worry about. Forever Young, Anushba Tesoro, Derma Sotogaki, who ran so well in the race last year, is coming back as well. But I think City of Troy has the right attributes. He seems to be very strong at the finish of his races. He seems to be happy to go through that sort of pain barrier. We saw it as a 2-year-old. I think it's going to demand a lot of him, this race, the Breeders' Cup Classic. Just because how those races have run, and it'll totally different challenge to if he'd have run in the turf, say. But I think he might do it.
How important do we think the draw is? That's going to be made tonight, 11:45 British time is when it will begin. I mean, Del Mar's a really tight track, really one of the tightest US tracks. You talked about the running style and the importance of a break. Of course, one of the unknowns as well is how does he handle the kickback if he's up in the melee of it? That can really sort of scupper a horse's chances very quickly. And of course, we have one instance where City of Troy sort of down tools this year. So how important is that draw? Is it make or break tonight?
It's going to be very important, but I think it would be impossible to say whether it's make or break. It depends where the other horses are drawn, the pace is drawn around him, really. You want to know where Forever Young's going to come from, for instance. He's not, for a dirt horse, he's not too keen on kickback either, although he certainly went some way to disproving that in the Kentucky Derby when he was ridden more quietly. But yeah, do we think they're going to go forward? They could do. Well,
that's the question, because he did it at York, slightly surprising people in a very sort of positive ride by Ryan Moore. Rightly got a lot of plaudits for it. You'd think, if I were, heaven forbid, if I were making the decisions, I would be keen to go forward. But then if the question is, does he have that pace out the gates against all these US horses who have trained from day one to do that?
Yeah. You'd imagine they'd have certainly done some more practice at home with him, and it wouldn't just be what we saw at Southall. But yeah, I certainly think given, as I say, how powerful he is in the finish, they will certainly be wanting him there and thereabouts. So a decent draw. People think all the time, we want an inside draw smack bang along the rail, but that's not necessarily always the case, particularly not if other horses are drawn away from you. Or if the ground is, if the track's riding slower up the rail, which it often can.
Or you slightly miss a break, and then you're right
trapped.
in the thick of
Exactly.
it. Yeah.
So it's hard for me to say he wants this draw because it depends where the others are drawn. But I do think they will want to be prominent enough. But yeah, it's just a fascinating spectacle, isn't it? You've got all these questions, and the fact that no horse has ever done it before. Giant's Causeway, of course, came so close in that epic battle with Tisnow. Aidan O'Brien's flung quite a few top-class horses at it. We had the big read with him, of course, yesterday in the paper.
DJ very busy before he heads off.
Indeed, talking all about how he's not afraid to say what he thinks, and he does genuinely think City of Troy is, we've heard it from him throughout the season, the best he's ever had. The stats don't say that just yet. So will we find out over the weekend? And there's so much more good racing as well. That's just the main event.
We'll come back to some of the other races in just a second. I want to bring James in here just to quickly get your view on the classic conundrum. Can Troy do it?
I would love City of Troy to win it, but from a betting perspective, I would not go near the race at all. It's an impossible challenge, really, to bring a horse over. A Derby horse, a horse who's progressed all the way through the season for all he has, to go and win on the dirt would be an incredible achievement. I just think there's too much uncertainty to be looking at the race from a punting perspective. Agree with what you said regarding York. I look back at that race now and wonder, was that half with an eye of the Breeders' Cup in mind? Quite possibly. The draw, I think, is absolutely crucial. Not just, oh, you don't want to be stuck out wide on this sort of tight turning track, but more so what's surrounding you, what's right by you, and things like that. That sometimes can just eliminate chances, regardless how good the horse is. So I'm sat here on Monday morning thinking, no, I'm not going to touch it. For all I hope he wins it. The only thing I will say is just look at what Ryan Moore has achieved in the last few years. I mean, when you think about top level sportsmen and sports people, regardless, competing at the highest of their grade, they often make mistakes. This is a man who just never, ever seems to make many, if at all, any mistakes, which is quite incredible when you think about it. You think about something like a really good snooker player, they miss pots. Something like a great footballer, they miss penalties. Just time and time again, Ryan Moore just gets it right. And it might not always look, he might not always win by half the track or anything silly like that. But tactically, he is so aware and so brilliant. I mean, that I think is a huge advantage that City of Troy's got. Not that least that he knows the horse well, but you've got someone that is just so ultra reliable. I think it's such a huge asset. I think, speaking more generally, I think fantastic that this is going to be on ITV. I mean, seeing a Derby winner progress and have this go, I think it would have been a bit of a shame if people who have only followed racing through terrestrial TV wouldn't have got a chance to see this. The campaigning of City of Troy needs to be hugely applauded. I mean, we were speaking before about jumps and horses aren't ready for October. I mean, we've got a Derby winner trying to win at the Breeders' Cup. We've possibly got a Guineas winner trying to win at the Breeders' Cup. You know, this is the top of the best European horses going out to America. And for me, watching on Saturday night, the thing I particularly like is I always used to love watching the Riders' Cup, where you'd get Team Europe going and beating the Americans on their own backyard. For a European horse to go and beat the Americans in a Breeders' Club Classic, it'd be good, wouldn't it?
That would be something, absolutely. I'll lay my cards on the table. At current prices, I'd be laying City of Troy.
I can't believe I'm the only one who's with him. This is kind of mad.
Yeah, maybe Placely actually, but because I think you'll either take to it or you really won't, and then
could end in disaster, couldn't it?
I hope they do it. But let's look at the undercard.
Yeah.
Breeders' Cup Turf. Should we start there? What's your highlight on the undercard? Where is your attention drawn?
Funnily enough, not the turf.
Okay.
I think the turf sprint. You've got the three Bs: Bradsell, Believing, and Big Evs.
Yes,
again, draw's going to be key
Nick
there.
Appleby, California again. Fantastic. Can he do it twice?
Exactly. And Believing, her campaign's been sensational. You know, she's not won one of these big ones, but I was out in Hong Kong in April and she was there, and she's still been on the go in all these big sprints. Very adaptable filly. And Bradsell, I mean, he was a bit unfortunate in the Prix de l'Abbé, wasn't he? Beaten by Makarova, but he is a proper sprinter, and great that he's going to be standing. Am I right in thinking he's standing at the National Stud when he retires? That's going to be. He's such an attractive stallion prospect, so hopefully he can sign off with a good effort. Also looking forward to seeing Torpedo Anna in the distaff. She's been fantastic. Dirt filly, winning the Kentucky Oaks, the Oakhorn Stakes, the American Oaks. She was agonisingly denied in the Travers when she was second there, and then has since won the Cotillion. So of the dirt horses other than City of Troy, she's the superstar for me. And the Mile, we've got some real big hitters there. Notable speech you mentioned from the 2,000 Guineas. Porta Fortuna's been amazing this year. She arguably should have won the 1,000 Guineas and then has swept all before her since. And Ramatuelle, who... That was an unbelievable performance in the Prix de la Forêt, wasn't it? You don't see a horse accelerate in that ground very often. This test should really suit her, and of course French horses have a magnificent record when they go over to
just
the
the one
Breeders'
going out this year, though.
Is it just her?
Just one.
Wow.
Yeah, surprising actually, because they've been quite ambitious campaigning this year. But yeah, it's going to be fantastic. So Breeders' Cup, Friday and Saturday. We're going to have live blogs on racingpost.com. Going to be great coverage all through the week, brought to you by David Jennings on the ground in Delmar and the wider team of analysts and experts we have. So do stay tuned for that in the Racing Post newspaper and digital platforms. And also check out our new WhatsApp service, Racing Post Insider, which you can learn more about just now. Welcome back. We're going to conclude today with a look at the final days of the European flat season. It was just over a week ago where the curtain was brought down on the British flat season, or certainly the official part of the British flat season at Ascot with Champions Day. Lots of fantastic racing taking place, but was the most interesting thing actually happening a few hundred miles away? About half an hour after the horses crossed the line in the Balmoral, a maiden took place in the twilight at Leopardstown. It was won in very impressive style by an unheralded 28-1 Ballydoyle shot, Twain, beating two more fancied stablemates. And then just 8 days later, he was supplemented for the Criterium at Saint-Cloud, which he also won and suddenly skyrocketed up the anti-post lists for next year's classics. It's as short as 8-1 for the Guineas, although more generally available at 14 and 16-1, and slightly bigger for the Derby. But joining that small group of juveniles who are very prominent in the betting for next year's big 3-year-old races. Maddie, let's start with Twain. What did you make of the Criterium?
Loved it. Thought it was a wonderful sort of Derby trial as you'd ever wish to see. The second horse, Mount Kilimanjaro, he's gorgeous. I loved how he stuck to his task as well. I think he's very solid sort of yardstick to measure Twain against, and to take that step in such a short amount of time was remarkable. We saw Aidan O'Brien, funnily enough, he doesn't really tend to do this too much, but we saw him do it in the Dewhurst with Expanded just 7 days after he won his first race. He chucked him in at Group 1 company, but Twain went one better. He just looks incredibly smart. Those French Group 1s have been pretty informative in the last couple of years. Los Angeles ran in one, didn't he, and did very well. I like them as Derby trials, and I like the later developing juveniles. I think you can often get a bit more upside as opposed to something that's, say, won the Chesham or the Coventry or has had to be out that early. Don't be dismissing Twain.
Really interesting that he obviously made his debut at Leopardstown, 28-1. Two more fancied Ballydoyle horses, second and third. It does sort of suggest that he took the Coolmore crew by surprise as well.
Definitely. And was it Mark Crean who rode him? Or?
Yes, £3 claim.
Very unheralded jockey, but went out in front. I think the tactics he showed that day were key. It was almost like he was a pacemaker, but he didn't come back to them. And I think Aidan O'Brien's quotes afterwards just sort of said, well, he was going very comfortably within himself, and when they do that, you can't really interrupt their rhythm. And yeah, I like it when you get a bit of an upset or something surprises among the Ballydoyle ranks, because it proves that they don't know exactly the quality of stock that they're dealing with. And even the greats like Aidan O'Brien, who have all this experience and expertise, sometimes something can surprise them.
Yeah, and fantastic. James was talking about the way Ballydoyle campaign their horses, and great that you win surprisingly win a maiden in great style, and then 8 days later they send them to a Group 1 in Europe. At the top of the Colts Classics market, so we've still got the Lion and Winter. Obviously haven't seen since York. Do you think still a solid favourite? I mean, you were just talking about the later developing juveniles. We haven't had a chance to really test that form. Wimbledon Hawkeye second that day, of course.
It's let the form down, hasn't he? A
little bit disappointing in the futurity as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I would much rather be with those later maturing types, the likes of Twain, etc. Or even, we might not have seen the Derby winner yet. You just don't know. I think with the Lion in Winter, I know there have only been very small niggly issues that have seen him knocked out of races. The Dewhurst one, was that just a bruise or a bruised foot, or it was something very small and minor?
Yeah.
But that does concern me a little bit, because we've missed two opportunities now to see him on the track, and it's hard to get a handle on how good that form really is. As you say, it might not be up to much. He's clearly an incredibly talented horse, but I would much rather recency bias and pedigree 2 of Twain.
Yeah, I'd be with you with Twain. James, quick view from the West Country on the Classics?
There's not much from here that's going to win it, Tom. But no, I was hoping that you guys wouldn't mention Twain, because I was really, really impressed with what he's achieved in such a really short space of time as well. I like in this sort of, I've not been too fussed on the line win, so I'm aware of the sort of niggles and stuff, and I always like a horse to be on a quite rapid upward trajectory towards the Guineas. It is the final 2-year-old race of the season, people say, and it's always a case of looking for those ones who were quite early developers. It's the traditional way of looking at it. I think this horse is A, very talented, and B, just going to continue improving. You mentioned the fact he was massive odds on debut. When you're Aidan O'Brien, you've got that many 2-year-olds who are just progressing at all different rates. It's an impossible task to try and rank who's better than. So I completely dismiss that as sort of any sort of, I don't know, concern or doubt or whatever. He's the one for me at this point. The one classic sort of interest I've got is a horse called Dreamy in the Oaks, who is huge by all accounts. She won at Goodwood first time out, looked like a really smart horse in the making. So had a few runs this season, won on an X start, and then was beaten in the Fillies Mile. Just looks an absolute Oaks horse all day long. Big price, but just classic horse for that race. And the only other thing I would say about the Classics next season is notable speech. Went to Kempton, won at Kempton twice, won the. Perhaps we should be looking less so about the Group 1s, but the all-weather action in April if we're going to find the Classic winners. So interesting to see that way of campaigning horses has come through, and I'll certainly be watching that in the early part of the season with a bit more interest.
James, you read my expert jury the other day with Dreamy. Stole my selection. I totally agree with you there. I think the decision to run her in the Fillies Mile was just purely an educational basis. I don't think they're expecting her to sparkle there, but I definitely agree with you on that one.
Love it. Let's just close with our performance and race of the season, Maddie.
Nice, easy one for me. Royal Ascot in the summer. Before I say this, I don't want to be too down, but I think if it wasn't for City of Troy, this flat season was missing something. And for me, we saw it at Royal Ascot, and that was in the Hardwicke Stakes when Isle of Jura won for Callum Shepherd and George Scott. I was lucky enough to be on the report as well, and the horse had shown magnificent improvement. You know, went out to win the Triple Crown in Bahrain for his owners and the Victorious Racing Group, and came and downed, you know, the likes of Aidan O'Brien and all the big hitters in the Hardwicke. Callum Shepherd, obviously, he'd been jocked off Ambiente Friendly in the Derby, and love any time Callum is interviewed on TV. He's got a real character, real personality, and he's kind of got his cheeky side coming out. But we saw something totally different for him in the Ascot Winners' enclosure. It was very emotional, very touching to see him talk about Stefano Kirky, his good friend who he lost, and reflect on basically how he'd managed to get through being jocked off a leading Derby fancy. And he spoke so graciously about it, and you could tell that his first, I think it might have been, it was definitely his first Royal Ascot winner, but it might have been one of his first Ascot winners as well. It was so meaningful, and I think often on the flat we're so used to, as excellent as they are, ushering in Aidan O'Brien and John Gosden and people who have been there and done it before. And with Callum, you know, he just absolutely poured his heart out to the press. He was ecstatic, but there was also depth there. You know, there was a very sad, sombre undertone to it, given that he'd lost his good friend, and he was reflecting on all things life and racing, and it was just a particularly profound moment for me. And it was a great shame when he was then ruled out the King George and the rest of the season. So I can't wait to see Isle of Jura back, because I think he was almost the saviour of the flat season for me, barring City of Troy. I think we needed that sort of story and that sort of energy to carry us through.
Love that. Love that. Beat that, James.
Okay, well, I'm going to go for the horse which won with a sense of irony, and that was Goliath in the King George at odds of 25-1. Now, this wasn't just the performance of the season for me. Travelled through the race just unbelievably well. You couldn't believe how well this horse was travelling against some of the best middle distance horses in Europe. The second, Blue Stocking, went and won the Arc, so the form of that race looks absolutely unbelievable. But I think what's particularly special about this race is the authorities in France would have seen the brilliant French gelding win the King George and then realise, heck, we can't have this horse run in the Arc. Obviously, one of the big talking points this year has been him and Calandagan, the King Edward winner, who won very, very well that day. Two really smart horses in France who can't run in France's signature middle distance race. And if any horse has got that rule and that long-standing debate open again, it was Goliath in the King George. He may well go and beat Auguste Rodin in the Japan Cup, which very excited to be going out for. Not least was that the brilliant performance, but I also think that might just be the springboard to what would be a really drastic change for not just future flat seasons, but way horses are campaigned and, well, changed, I suppose would be the right way to say it, but for a long way to go. I don't particularly feel strongly that gelding should be allowed in the Arc, but I think after what we've seen on the evidence this year, it might be a sensible step, and that might be the race and the single performance which completely changes middle distance flat racing in Europe.
We're not going to reopen the geldings in the Arc debate, despite your best efforts. We've only got mere seconds remaining, so I'm going to nominate for my performance of the season Charon in the QE2. Just a soupçon lower on the ratings than City of Troy, but what a wonderfully consistent horse. I mean, pulling out the best RPR of their season in their 7th run in a fantastic performance at Ascot. So that is my performance of the season. What do you think? Let us know in the comments. Please do get in touch, or with anything else this week. Do you think City of Troy will win at Del Mar? We're going to find that out this week. Stay tuned to the Racing Post through the week as we bring you the latest from Del Mar, and then tune in again next week as we discuss it on the front page. Until then, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to my guests, Maddie and James, and we'll see you again soon.